And I'm really excited about the upcoming speakers, people who will talk to us about all different aspects of this important subject of being healthier and having better nutrition. And it comes from very many different points of view. I have to say, as a medical doctor, this all started out for me caring for people. That's all I really cared about was people. You know, I'm a doctor, I'm supposed to help people. I didn't really care about anything else. The environment, who cares? And really, I was an abuser of the environment. Animal rights, what do I care? It was my birthright to eat all these animals. I didn't really care. But fortunately, over the past 44 years of being involved in this business, my awareness has changed. And there was a time about 15 years ago I got a little frustrated with taking care of people. They stopped listening to me like I thought they should and started listening to those low-carb, high-protein, meat-eating, bacon-eating gurus out there, and I just kind of lost all hope and curtailed some of my enthusiasm. And it stayed curtailed until I became more aware and until I started seeing my children grow up and seeing that they had a future, until I started having grandchildren. And then I decided it was time for me to come back. And it was the environmental issues that got me most concerned. Because if we don't change things, my children and grandchildren have no future. And so I came back about 8 years ago with a vengeance. And I'm here to stay, and I'm gonna again, whether or not you're offended by anybody who talks about animal rights or you're offended about anybody who's concerned about the environment, I don't really care. Because you need to know this. You need to know another point of view on why we need to get the diet of this planet straightened around. And so in my search for the world experts on the topic of the environment, animal rights, conscious living, I found our next speaker. A dentist? How would a dentist? Well, we'll find out how a dentist got interested in the environment, why his passion has come to the same level as mine has, where he really wants to change the world, doesn't care, will take and tell you everything you need to know about how to become a more aware and conscious person. And so with great pleasure, I welcome Dr. Richard Oppenlander.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Very ready.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. McDougall. Well done, of course. And, all right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Oh, come. You can do better than that. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. That's right. Yeah. Well, with all that, great starchy energy food, you should be able to do that. All right. Well, what a wonderful weekend event this is, isn't it? And thank all of you for taking the time to be here and making it so very special. This is what we're going to be discussing. Now, how many of you have heard how many of you have attended one of my previous lectures? Anyone? Okay, my immediate family can put their hands down. Thank you. I try to pad everything here a little bit. All right, just one or two of you, that's it? Oh, and this was supposed to be your advanced group. Oh, all right, I guess we'll have to start with something a little more simple, something basic, something that we can build on. Everybody would have a good start with. Let's start with this concept. All right, we there? All right. Well, many of the choices that we make in life have a profound impact on something else in the world. This is especially true with things you consume, like food. It's one of the major disconnects we seem to have. What you do here might affect something over there. How to start looking outside of the microcosm or the bubble that each of us tends to live in, and then perhaps, just perhaps, encourage others to do the same. How does your breakfast, lunch, or dinner, for instance, what you choose to eat today, have anything to do with this shaman from the Amazon area in Peru, or one of the 2 billion people in the world without water, or the imminent extinction of a number of species on Earth, or the plight of this starving child in Ethiopia, or even the taxes that I have to pay this year to our government, or should pay to our government? Well, many of us in this room know now that there is some food choice connection, but how serious is it? What timelines are we on, and what are we doing about it? Let's start off with a photo, shall we? I mean, what do you see in this photo? Without reading too much into it, typically one would see beautiful blue skies, rolling hills, green grass. Now, we're going to come back to this photo a bit later. We're going to take a closer look at it at the end. So let's make a little mental imprint of it for now, and we're going to tuck it away, okay? I stopped eating animals nearly 40 years ago when I was in graduate school from a health, wellness, and environment standpoint. I mean, it just seemed obvious to me. And also because of the animal research I was involved with at that time. Now, I still do quite a bit of animal research. Yes, I do, but now it's more related to the effect of our food choices. Now it's more of this type of animal research, perhaps in a jungle or a remote area, getting a better grasp on what sustainability really does in fact mean. So that would have to include researching animals like these, of course, at the largest dairy operations in the world, some of them not too far from here, as you know, and these grass-fed or pastured operations here in the US and many, many countries overseas. This happens to be in the UK. That guy really likes me, and I'm not talking about the person up there. And researching farms like these. And we can't leave fish out of the equation now, can we? As always, we're going to examine the word sustainable pretty carefully, because recently it's been morphed into so many different meanings to suit so many different needs, and it's the latest buzz. I mean, you see this word everywhere. Now, I found that the word sustainable for most people refers to our energy sector. How many miles per gallon of gas your car can achieve, how many energy-efficient light bulbs you can switch out to save electricity, and to waste, how, what, and when to recycle. Often we think of economic or even social sustainability, but in most areas of the world, no one really knows much about, and they certainly don't care to hear or talk about what effect our food has on our environment, especially a certain type of food. And that's because I feel they're unaware. And they're pretty comfortable being that way, I mean, despite the enormous effect. It's just simply too challenging for everyone, culturally, socially. I call all this global depletion, the loss of our primary resources on Earth, as well as our own health. It's still sustainability. I just think we need to hear it from a different direction, and I think we need to hear the whole story through an unfiltered lens. How many here are familiar with the work of Jamie Oliver and Mark Bittman and, of course, Michael Pollan? Industrialization of food and high fructose corn syrup, eating less meat, important, sure, yeah. But these are just fragments of the picture. We need to move beyond all this and understand the entire picture, the sustainability of our planet, our resources, and ourselves. And to do this, we need to always include topics such as loss of biodiversity, world hunger, sustainability of our own health, of course, which is quite well covered here, water scarcity, agricultural land use inefficiencies, the state of our oceans and fish, and climate change. It's a pretty long and potentially daunting list, isn't it? But they're all affected. With food choice or life in general, I think the key to understanding or solving a problem really begins with recognition that there is indeed a problem to solve. And then, how large is it? So maybe we should view the Earth as one of us for just a moment. Let's treat it as a patient. For instance, none of us are aware of our planet's cholesterol levels or cardiovascular condition, are we? And certainly most of us are not aware of or even concerned about the increasing size of Earth's cancerous tumor or its sudden loss of weight. And when you have the cancer removed, if you had that opportunity, would you remove part of it or would you remove all of it? And how about the failing lungs of our planet? Are we aware of those on a daily basis? This happens to be a rainforest being destroyed in Malaysia. Or are we aware of the traumatic and permanent loss of one of our planet's fingers or arms or legs, things that we may never see again? The Javan and the Tasmanian tiger are already gone. The Ridley sea turtle is on its way out. And then there's the mental status. I mean, are we aware of the severe psychosis our Earth is struggling with, and what else would you want to call it? And by the way, is this seen from a factory farm or a grass-fed slaughterhouse? Anybody know? It's both. It's both. They both end up in the same place. See, and treated in the same manner. The answer to all this is no. We're not aware. Unfortunately, there are no annual checkups, and information about our planet's health hasn't been managed very well. It's not been related correctly to our food choices. Once we're able to better communicate the reality of the state of our planet, the global depletion caused by our choice of foods, and once awareness levels are raised, well, then solving these issues and creating a truly healthy planet becomes easier, just as could be accomplished with a patient. Well, the story always begins with these two numbers for me. There are 7 billion people living on our planet today, 230,000 added every single day. So control of the growth of our population is an issue, but it's not nearly so much of a problem as the number on the right, what we're doing to the planet. The number on the right represents the fact that there are more than 70 billion animals living on our planet that we raise and eat for food each year, and it repeats itself year after year in growing numbers, and that is the problem. In fact, this 70 billion number is a bit impossible to pin down, I use that word correctly, and it's very much on the light side, because on any given day, you may find up to 1.7 trillion chickens, or 1 to 2 trillion fish in the world, sooner or later going off to slaughter that year. Let's look at a graphic about global depletion. Certainly there are other industries that contribute to this picture, but none have the comprehensive impact. Now, just how serious is this depletion? Very. In some cases, it's irreversible, and it's spiraling downward quickly. All of these systems that you see are affected. Simply put, we're demanding more of our planet's resources than what it can supply. It would take 1.5 to 2 full Earths to sustain what we're currently taking from and doing to our planet. Most of this is due to our choice to eat animals, as we're going to see. It's serious enough on its own merit, but it's made much more so because of all the layers and layers of various influences that tend to bury the problem and then bury its solutions. We just don't want to deal with it. I mean, we can put every other major problem in the world at the top of the list to fix except for this one, and yet this is the world. Now, what's critical for everyone to understand is that this is not just a factory farm issue, not at all. It's a raising animals to eat issue, and we're going to see that as we go along today. Let's refine our thoughts on global warming, or climate change. First, we need to remember that global warming is just one component of the much larger, more insidious problem of global depletion, the more total effect we have on our planet. And the most important thing anyone can do about global warming or global depletion is take a good look at what's on their plate. Specifically, all foods derived from fish and livestock, and yes, that has to include dairy. Cheese, yogurt, even eggs, ice cream, milk, all part of the problem. This widely cited study was shocking when it first appeared, almost being dismissed. I mean, how could the meat everyone's eating cause more greenhouse gases than all the cars, trucks, planes, and trains that we drive and fly every day? It was hardly believable. But instead of 18%, as the original 2006 United Nations report stated, a number of researchers, independent of each other, have now found that livestock can produce, it's possible, that they can produce as much as 51% of all human-induced greenhouse gas emissions found in our atmosphere, mostly created by the respiratory carbon dioxide and the land use changes that they didn't account for in that first report, and the methane production by these billions of animals themselves. It's not due to confinement or as a byproduct of factory farming methods. Now, most researchers now agree that this figure is minimally 30%. And this is also without factoring in, it's without factoring in all the greenhouse gases emitted because of our demand to eat fish. The fuel, refrigeration, processing, packaging, transportation, etc. Regardless of where this exact number resides, somewhere between 30 and 51%, it's not 18. And it's also not acceptable. A perfect example of how this information is suppressed occurs every single year during our climate change conferences, held originally in Kyoto with its 1997 Kyoto Protocol, and most recently it was in Doha, where countries come together and they're trying to solve this global warming problem, at least superficially, but none of this is being addressed. In fact, at these conferences, it's now being postponed. It's very important for them and everyone else to understand that it won't really matter how many light bulbs are changed out, and it won't matter how many hybrid cars there are on the road if we don't first change out the way we eat. Nothing was really accomplished at Doha then, consistent with previous conferences, primarily because the two largest emitters in the world, China and the US, don't participate. And the countries that do, the 200 countries that are in attendance, well, they can't agree on anything. So now the attention at these prestigious conferences are turning to how we can all adapt to climate change, since it appears to be inevitable to them that climate change is inevitable, rather than just putting forth the effort to mitigate it. Every aspect of global depletion then has a timeline. It's not really a question of if we're going to run out of something, it's when. The most critical timeline of all, I think, is climate change. We have a 3 to 4 year window of time from now to drastically reduce greenhouse gas emissions, or we will eventually see irreversible warming of our planet. Most experts agree that if our planet's temperature increases just 2 degrees centigrade from previous historic levels, well, we're going to see catastrophic effects. Complete loss of island countries, severe droughts, flooding, storms. Some of that sound familiar? Yeah, that's because we're already halfway there to that 2 degrees centigrade mark. In fact, the International Energy Agency has been quite clear about that window of opportunity for us to limit global warming, and that window closes at the end of year 2017. Sounds pretty scary to me. Something everyone should be aware of and concerned about, right? But what does this have to do with food? Get this guy off the stage. Well, that's a good question, because we all believe that climate change is caused by the energy sector. Electricity, burning fossil fuels, especially coal. I mean, what certainly doesn't have anything to do with food. And that belief begins with Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth, and it carries right on through articles such as this one by Bill McKibben, where he blames Shell Oil, BP, and Exxon for climate change. They're the culprits. Well, they do have something to do with it, but whether it's with winning a Nobel Peace Prize, or at an annual global climate change conference, or with prominent publications such as this, those with a platform that are being heard have failed to mention or properly position the role of eating animals, despite its incredible factual contribution of 1/3 to 1/2 of the problem. Here's some math to think about. Most climatologists feel that our planet's atmosphere can only take on another 565 gigatons of carbon equivalent greenhouse gases by the year 2050, with any chance ever to stay below a 2 degrees centigrade rise. It's been shown that livestock can produce, it's possible, they could produce up to 32 gigatons per year. Carbon equivalent greenhouse gases from methane and carbon dioxide production, deforestation, etc. So, without using any gas or oil or coal ever again, it's conceivable that we could exceed our atmospheric carbon equivalent maximum, the 565 gigatons, by the year 2030, without the energy sector even factored into the equation. To summarize the connection between food choice and climate change, we have this. Climate change is very real, it's worsening, and the situation's urgent. Greenhouse gas emissions that we produce, anthropogenic, significantly affect climate change. Raising animals for us to eat is one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, as large or nearly as large as the energy sector. And lastly, any food movement away from factory farms, but including grass-fed or pastured systems, will not solve the problem. In fact, it's going to make it much worse. More land use changes, more deforestation, and by far more production of methane, 40 to 60% minimally more methane produced per one single grass-fed cow. So looking at solutions, what do we have? Some prescriptions. Well, this is what we have. The first approach is what I call the no worries approach, because it's not real. Climate change doesn't exist, right? That's what some people think. And of course, the other approach is to reduce our dependence on fossil fuel, just like McKibben and Al Gore and everyone else recommends. But renewable energy infrastructure, such as building solar and wind generators all over our country to reduce climate change, well, that's a good idea, but it's projected to take at least 20 more years and $18 trillion to develop. Well, we don't have 20 years, and we certainly don't have $18 trillion. So another solution to climate change would be we could stop eating animals today. It doesn't have to take 20 years. And instead of $18 trillion, it costs nothing. That's the prescription to mitigate, not adapt to, but mitigate climate change. Interspersed throughout our discussions are a few themes. One theme is how information about this particular subject has been suppressed, even mismanaged. So much so that objectives of many important meetings, like the climate change conferences and other organizations, well, those objectives aren't being met. And that all begins with the words we use, I think. How clear are they? Are they conveying reality? These are all food movements that superficially seem to make sense. Yeah, they make sense because they make you feel as if you're going in the right direction, because they're going away from factory farms. They're going away from processed foods. That's a good thing, right? Maybe, maybe not. Do any of these words mean sustainable or healthy? Many would want you to think so. How about the word humane? Does humane equal sustainable? And if it does, which it doesn't, who is it that tries to define humane for all of us? Incredibly, there is one person alive today that the USDA and every humane certified organization relies on, even overseas, for that definition of humane, one person. Does humane even equal humane? Well, all livestock operations in the world, every one of them, have a completely different definition of the word humane than I do. This statement I plucked. It was taken from the food service section of the sustainability policy of UC Berkeley. Their definition of humane raised, as you can see, is sustainable. It's one and the same. Imagine that. And also take a closer look at their logo across the top. I mean, it's pretty telling that their one snapshot depiction of sustainability is with energy and greenhouse gas emissions. Well, that being the case, we now know that half of those wind generators should be replaced by the words "no livestock," shouldn't they? That'd be a bit more accurate for UC Berkeley, wouldn't it? And what does real food mean? I have issues with its precepts. I mean, real food's a very large movement today. It's becoming larger on college campuses, and it's defined by being local, fair, sustainable, and humane. All four. Well, that sounds great. So I brought two food items with me that I thought I'd show you. One is considered not real food. And it's not real food. It's this Vega bar. It's not real food because it's not local. It's made in Vancouver. Oh, it's terrible. And worse, much worse, it's all put together for you. It's processed. That's terrible. But it does have sachi-inchi seeds, and it has 4 different types of organic plant protein, really put together quite beautifully. But remember, it's not real food. It doesn't fit their definition. Whereas this other item I brought with me is real food. Actually, I couldn't get myself around to bringing the other food item with me. I used to do it, but I just can't do it anymore. It's this. Over 17,000 chickens are killed every minute, every 60 seconds in our country. I suppose that's pretty real, right? And if chickens, beef, pork, or any animal product is considered real food, how about these? Real food too? Sure, why not? They come along with it, and they're free. So unlike the Vega bar, this poor thing is considered real food because it's local. And the real food people think it's sustainable, healthy, and humane. But it's not. It's none of those things, other than being local. Therefore, the real food movement is flawed because their definitions they're using are flawed, similar to every other thing, every other food movement on this list. Yeah, just because something's local doesn't at all mean that it's healthy or sustainable or, of course, humane. It doesn't even mean that it should be eaten. The only thing that local means is that it's not very far from here. Again, it all begins with the words we use. I mean, how clear are they? Are they conveying reality? This represents a food term that's constantly used improperly, if not abused. We hear this every day. What is this? It's a protein. Yeah, perhaps a rudimentary protein, and there are many variations, but when you're thinking about eating protein, well, this is what you should be thinking about, as in, I need to get my protein today, right? Yeah, protein's not the little buddy looking over my shoulder here. No, that's my research assistant. All right, that's pretty obvious, isn't it? And what about this group therapy session? I mean, really, none of these guys want to be called protein. Pretty sure of that. How'd Miss Piggy get in there? They love her. Okay, protein is also not the guy on the left here. And yet that's what people are calling protein, aren't they? The guy on the left with the overzealous smooch and the excessive amount of saliva that he always has, he's a cow. I mean, he shouldn't be called protein. He shouldn't be called protein any more than the guy on the right. And yet we do. In fact, his name's Plato. And what about this phrase? 15 million people heard Ted Danson proclaim his love of fish on Earth Day last year and every other day since 1987, and yet he eats them, okay, for all those years. Now, no offense to Mr. Danson, please, and maybe things have changed recently, but for him and 98% of all other individuals in the world, this phrase, I love fish, actually means this. I love to eat fish, doesn't it? Yeah, of course, that's what he really means. If he loved fish, as in loving his cat or his dog, or as much as I love you guys right now, he certainly wouldn't kill and eat them, would he? No, I don't think so. Again, it's how we use our words, isn't it? In fact, Oceana's Objectives, one of the most influential conservation organizations in the world, their objectives were made very clear last year in an interview where their spokesperson, Mr. Danson, stated, it's not about saving the fish. It's about saving the fishermen. And that explains quite a bit, doesn't it? There are 3 principal ways our oceans are being destroyed, and all 3 are caused or at least heavily affected by our food choice. Raising and eating animals on land causes warming and acidification of our oceans, which are just trying to protect us and moderate things that we're doing wrong. 90% of the excess heat added to Earth's climate since the 1960s has been stored in our oceans, which is triggering extreme weather events and killing sea life. More than 50% of all excessive greenhouse gases that have been emitted have been absorbed by our oceans, which has dropped pH levels, causing acidification by 30%, making it difficult for certain species to survive. Surface runoff from livestock operations on land has caused more than 500 nitrogen-flooded dead zones around the world, comprising 95,000 square miles of areas completely devoid of life. So any meaningful discussion of the state of our oceans with anybody has to first begin with discussions about land-based animal agriculture. But it is still fishing that has the largest impact of all. Let's take a proper and more accurate look at our oceans then. Incredibly large amounts of sea life are taken from our oceans in three ways. First, they're taken as target fish, you know, the one you want to eat. Next, they're taken out of our oceans to feed other fish produced on factory fish farms, part of the aquaculture movement. And lastly, fish are also taken as bykill due to the first two types of fishing. Oh my goodness, that really doesn't leave too much in our oceans now, does it? In fact, our oceans are being ravaged. And yet, I mean, who here doesn't know that? Well, if everyone knows this, why are we still eating fish? Fragile, interdependent, and poorly understood ecosystems have been devastated. Over 90 million tons of fish were caught last year, with quite a few more millions of tons of bykill, which are all those other innocent sea life caught, killed, and discarded in the process of trying to catch that targeted fish everyone's asking for. Bykill includes juvenile fish, all 7 of the endangered sea turtles, sea lions, birds, dolphins, even whales. I mean, come on, is that really worth it? I mean, this is embarrassing. Of the 17 major fishing stock areas in the world, all of them are either overexploited or on the verge of collapse. 85% of the world's fish species are affected, considered heavily depleted from overfishing practices. That's quite a bit of damage. But along comes this word, sustainable, to justify continued harvesting. Well, yeah, we can just stamp that word on anything, and then we can continue in the take mode, and we can feel good about it. Why? Well, because it's sustainable. I mean, how's that word even used in the fishing industry? Who defines it? Who monitors it? And with less than 1% of all of our oceans being regulated today, who decides on enforcement? Now, if you look at this carefully, or even not so carefully, the real answer is no one. And I say real answer because now there's sea life caught and labeled sustainable when in fact it's not. But it's still labeled as such by a number of highly respected organizations, such as the Marine Stewardship Council. And there are many, many examples: tuna, cod, pollock, haddock, salmon, krill. I mean, so many. I'd be up here another 3 hours talking about them. But the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch, highly respected organization, has lobster from the Gulf of Maine, both US and Canada waters, listed as a good alternative. They've had it listed as a good alternative for years now, but it's not. It never has been a good alternative for many reasons. Rapidly declining number of lobster, inefficient trapping mechanisms, and most importantly, I think, is the very sad effect lobster trapping has on a critically endangered North Atlantic right whale. I mean, there are only 400 of these truly magnificent creatures left that we haven't killed. And nearly all of them, 80% of them or more, are getting entangled, injured, and killed in those lobster trap lines. We owe these whales much more than this. Look closely, please. This young female North Atlantic right whale died shortly after this photograph was taken, found on a beach in Florida, essentially tortured, towing these lobster trap lines desperately along her migration route of over 2,000 miles from Canada, where she originally became entangled on her fins, on her body, on her tail, in her mouth, around her head. I mean, what a struggle this must have been. And this is not an isolated incident. It happens all the time, which is why I'm showing it to you. So eating lobster, we must ask, is sustainable for whom? Elsewhere in the world, there have been an estimated 500 miles of non-biodegradable fishing nets cut loose from fishing lines every year, each year for the past 25 years, catching countless numbers of unsuspecting sea life. These nets essentially become depots. They become depots of coagulated dead marine animals. You know, the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch is aptly named because that's exactly what they're doing. They're watching all of this happen while promoting it to be continued with trawling, purseine, and longline fishing methods. These three methods are the most widely used in fishing. All three are destructive, difficult if not impossible to monitor, and proven to be unsustainable. The only methods fully banned by Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch are using explosives and poisons. But both of those are on the rise globally because they're unenforceable. Each year, more than 300,000 whales, dolphins, and porpoises are killed in fishing gear. This is just one of the many prices that we all pay for someone at your table or my table eating fish labeled as sustainable. Everything else on this list are considered labeled sustainable, but none of them really are, and the list goes on and on. As I said, cod were fished only 1% of their original numbers off the coast of Newfoundland, more recently to a near extinct status in the North Sea, while stated they were sustainable. They will never recover in our lifetime. Cod are now by-kill. I mean, who would have thought of that? Sure, cod enjoys swimming with other fish, like haddock and pollock that are being caught in large numbers now. In the case of hoki, the new great white fish used by McDonald's in their fish sandwich now, well, because we've decimated the cod species, which used to be everyone's favorite fish sandwich. You know, when you run out of one fish species, what's the smart thing to do? Well, we just go to the next. Serial depletion. But catching hokies causes significant trawling damage, obvious loss of their own numbers. They keep dropping the quota amount every few years, unable to know what it really is, and the killing of thousands of seabirds and sea lions each year. Again, so why are they calling that sustainable? Oh, I'm sorry for the interruption. Someone would like to say something to everyone, and this always happens. Just a moment. All eyes on the screen, please. Happy Feet. I love that movie. Especially the first one. It's a shame that no one really listened to the message. The endangered western stellar sea lion in the Aleutian Islands lost over 50% of its already endangered population just in the last couple of years because of fishing operations there that were considered sustainable, when in reality it took away the food supply of the very few endangered sea lions that were left. And what's this? Yeah, well, don't ask me. I only know a few things about it because the world's leading scientists don't know much about it. But that didn't stop it from becoming certified as sustainable. How does that happen? How does something become sustainable when you don't know anything about it? This is the Ross Sea toothfish. More than 5,000 tons are now caught per year, many more thousands of tons illegally. And yet no one knows where they breed, where they spawn, and as of last year, no one had even seen a young toothfish. Bluefin tuna represent all, they represent all that we're doing wrong with our oceans. A little over a year ago, the ruling was made to not grant an endangered status to them, even though their numbers had dropped by 92%. They are already extinct in the Black and Caspian Seas, predicted to become extinct in the Mediterranean region by the end of next year. Just one of these bluefin tuna fish sold for $1.8 million in Japan just 2 months ago. That's going to help things. Instead of eating dolphin-free tuna, I think we should be concerned about eating simply tuna-free. This is a Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch's approved sustainable method of catching tuna. Coral reef systems around the world are in serious trouble. The Great Barrier Reef has lost more than half of its coral cover since 1985. Most would think it's due to pollution and climate change. But the primary cause of coral reef death throughout the entire Caribbean region anyway, and most of the rest of the world, is not pollution. It's not from climate change. It's from overfishing. An example in the other direction can be found in the Queens Islands off the southern coast of Cuba, where they haven't allowed any commercial fishing. Their coral reef ecosystems today look the same as they have for the past thousands of years. One of the most important factors in balancing coral reef systems are apex feeders or predatory fish like sharks. But we're killing them too, quite a few of them. 1/3 of all shark species are now nearing extinction. We're killing nearly 100 million sharks per year. Why? Well, 40 million sharks have their fins cut off, like this one, and then they're thrown overboard to die. so we can eat shark fin soup. It's terrible to see this, isn't it? But I know what you're thinking, some of you. You're saying to yourself, I don't eat shark fin soup. No, not me. And furthermore, it's banned in 5 states in our country, including the state of California. Well, isn't that great? But again, over 98% of us do eat fish. And by eating fish, any type of fish, we're doing this to 60 million sharks that are caught each year and killed in fishing nets and fishing lines as bykill. So go ahead and ban shark fin soup all you want here. But why stop there? If you're truly concerned about sharks, you should ban fishing. The most heavily killed fish species in the world is the Alaskan pollock, harvested at a rate of 3 million tons per year, and it's still labeled as sustainable. Now, who would think you could take 3 million tons of any species from anywhere on Earth and think they wouldn't be missed? So here's the point regarding our oceans. It's no longer a problem of overfishing. That was late 1800s. It's about fishing. Whole Foods, Walmart, Wegmans have all pledged to eliminate all Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch red-listed seafood by Earth Day of this year. Compass Group joins Aramark as the 2 largest food service corporations in the world, or at least in North America, pledging to phase out seafood on the red list as well. At the end of the day, though, it's not really about a pledge from big business. It's about how accurately the word sustainable is being defined and then used. In fact, what we need, I think, is complete and immediate restoration of all oceanic ecosystems back to a balanced state where pluses and minuses occur naturally, not controlled or manipulated by our wants or by an organization influenced by money, which they all are. We want to eat lobster or Alaskan pollock, so therefore they're sustainable. Well, no worries, not to worry at all, because now we have fish farms. 49% of all fish consumed worldwide are produced from aquaculture, which is growing faster than any other food sector. One reason for this tremendous growth is the very false illusion of environmentalism. Asia now produces 91% of all farmed fish in the world. China produces 60%. Shrimp, tilapia, carp, with a vast majority of operations being completely unregulated. The US imported over 6 million tons of seafood in 2012, and half of those imports were from these unregulated farms. Here we have another interesting idea where fish are caught in our already ravaged oceans to feed other fish produced on factory fish farms, sometimes at a ratio of 20-1 in the form of fish, fish meal, fish oil. 88% of all fish oil and 56% of all fish meal now produced in the world is given to these fish farms. Fish farms can be located in our oceans, some in open water, but usually what used to be pristine coastal water. This is one of the many that I visited tucked into the Puget Sound. Here's one off the coast of Chile, and there's also one off the coast of Scotland, where just the salmon fish farms there in Scotland, just the salmon fish farms, produce nitrogen waste equal to a human population of more than 9 million people. And of course, we have land-based fish farms. 60% of all fish farms in the world are land-based. Some are outside, like this one, where he's posing for me and proudly showing me the protein again that they produce. Funny, it looks like a fish to me. And some fish farms are indoors. The largest indoor tilapia operation in the world is found in our state of Georgia. These indoor operations all pride themselves on environmental aspect of improved land use as compared to livestock, and they reduce the risk of spreading disease to other species as found in oceanic fish farms. However, I found that all of these fish farms, all these indoor-outdoor fish farms, they all use excessive amounts of electricity, pesticides, fungicides, antibiotics, and massive amounts, especially indoor fish farms, massive amounts of fresh water. And of course, all fish farms needlessly kill billions of lives each year, don't they? This is what I see behind the scenes at every single fish farm. This is the blood from over 7,000 fish just in 1 hour one morning. They were stabbed and bled to death. So is this humane? I mean, does anyone know what nociceptors are, especially polymodal nociceptors? No help from Dr. McDougall on this one. Well, polymodal nociceptors are sensory receptors associated with pain, feeling pain. Most mammals have numerous polymodal nociceptors in and around their face, their head, their neck. So do fish. There are now over 4 million fishing vessels in the world destroying ecosystems that have been in place for millions of years. Our rainforests are still being lost. 25 million acres last year by a combination of deforestation and degradation. That's tragic. This is what a few thousand to a million-year-old rainforest now looks like because the world's food priorities are with eating livestock, not with being stewards of other living things, as we should be. This is the sad result. Soon grass, pasture, and cattle will follow this in, usually erosion, desertification, and localized climate change as well. If you choose to eat livestock here in the US or anywhere else, you're going to be supporting this destruction by fueling the global demand for meat. Brazil announced just a few months ago that deforestation in their country hit a 24-year low last year. But what does that really mean? Because they still cut down 2,000 square miles of virgin rainforest during that one-year period of time, just in Brazil. And tropical deforestation rates are increasing in Bolivia, Peru, Malaysia, and numerous other countries in the world. 80% of all rainforest loss in the Amazon is still due to raising cattle, with another 10% loss due to growing crops to feed them and other livestock. And remember again, these livestock are grazing. It's not a matter of factory farming. We've already lost numerous ancient tribes, over 90 of them, shaman, undiscovered medicinal plants, and millions of living things. We'll never see them again. They shouldn't be lost. Our climate regulation shouldn't be jeopardized because of our inappropriate choice of foods. We simply don't really comprehend what we're doing to our rainforest, which reminds me of this next illustration I'm going to show you of two rainforest loggers that I happened to catch on a lunch break one day. Here they are. Oh, gosh. Yeah, we are oblivious to a number of things, aren't we? All right, I don't know how we can find humor in this, but it's quite easy to quantify our global depletion of land with far too much of it being used for the wrong purpose. I mean, you see this just about everywhere you go now. This is how much land is being used to raise livestock. 45% of the entire land mass on Earth. Now, how accurate is this ridiculous 45% figure? Well, it was documented by the International Livestock Research Institute. So most likely, this 45% figure was underestimated. In the US alone, nearly 78% of all land used for agriculture is used in some way to support the animals that we eat. But listen to this. There are 92 million cattle in the US today, 70 million pigs. Only 3% of all those are pastured. Only 1% of all livestock in general, and yet we're still using this much land. If you're concerned about protein, you can produce 15 times more of it from plants as you can from meat on any specific given area of land. With spirulina and chlorella, it's 2,000 times more protein. You can produce anywhere from 5,000 to 45,000 pounds of plant foods on 1 acre of land in 1 year versus only 480 pounds at best, at stretching at best, of meat or animal products on 1 acre, regardless of what Joel Salatin and the Polyphase Farm proponents will tell you. It's shocking knowing just how much land on Earth is used to raise animals, how seriously inefficient this really is. There are nearly 1 billion people suffering from hunger. This year alone, 6 million children will die from starvation. How does this relate? 82% of the world's starving children live in countries where food is fed to animals that are killed and eaten by more well-off individuals in developed countries like the US, UK, and in Europe. 1/4 of all grain produced by third world countries is now given to livestock in their country or out. To be sure, world hunger has many layers of complexity. One of the larger reasons is tied to poverty, but another significant factor is the looming shadow of our current demand to eat livestock and fish, which is indirectly tied to poverty. In fact, eating these animals ultimately affects food prices, food availability, certainly policy making, and even suppresses education to improve agricultural systems in developing countries. I know because I'm deeply involved in this right now. Our food choices and production systems now have far-reaching effects, with most of our global resources trapped inside of this livestock and fishing vacuum. In 2011, there was a record harvest of grain in the world, 2.5 billion tons. But half of that was fed to animals in the meat and dairy industries. 77% of all coarse grain produced in the world now goes to livestock. We can't blame climate change, droughts, or flooding for the world's food security issues. Most of our food is going to the wrong place. Now, solving world hunger is not as easy as simply giving them the grain that would normally go to livestock. It's not that easy. That's always been our argument, though, hasn't it? Yeah, solving hunger in developing countries, I think, and know, demands a multi-dimensional approach to sustainability, establishing it on many levels simultaneously, with plant-based food systems at the nucleus. The model for success at reducing hunger in developing countries, I believe, should look like this. There are now over 2 million NGOs in the world, 1 million of them conducting humanitarian efforts. We're not lacking good people who want to do good deeds. And all the care packages that are being produced by them of food are necessary sometimes as a short-term acute patch. But that's not going to solve world hunger. These people don't need more handouts. What they need are the tools to create sustainability for themselves long-term and through many layers. More than 80% of the population in most developing countries, especially in Africa, more than 80% are rural subsistence farmers living in poverty and illiteracy. So these are the layers of sustainability that can be achieved for them, all centered around a purely plant-based soil rebuilding system. No livestock anywhere in the picture. We're losing other species on Earth at an unprecedented rate. Most of us know this. With such a loss of biodiversity, plants, animals, and insects, that we're finding ourselves in another sixth era of large-scale extinction. The current view of most scientists is more related to the rate of extinction for a number of reasons, rather than the exact number. That we're losing anywhere between 1,000 and most likely 10,000 times the background rate, that which has been seen for the previous several thousands of years, which used to be 2 to 4 species going extinct per year. Regardless of the metric, it's now a massive amount. So why all the extinctions? And what are we doing about it? The most recent convention on biological diversity was held in Nagoya, Japan in October of 2010 as a follow-up to the one held in 2002. And they found at that convention that none of their goals from 2002 were met. Not one of them. Well, they decided to roll up their sleeves and get serious now and come up with a new game plan. So they agreed to protect 17% of the remaining land in the world that isn't being used by livestock. And they agreed to protect a whopping 10%, instead of 1% as it is now, 10% of our oceans by the year 2020. Now think about that. 7 years from now, we can all look forward to having 10% of our oceans protected. Nearly all concerned researchers agree that the primary cause of the rapid biodiversity loss that we're witnessing today on our planet is by pastured or grazing livestock on land and by unsustainable fishing practices in our oceans. There are only 300 Mediterranean monk seals left in the world. One of the most pressing concerns that we have today regarding sustaining our life and future life on Earth is our supply of water. We don't have much, and we're using all of it. Now, sure, it's a regional issue, but aquifers and wells are already drying up. There's a growing gap between worldwide demand for water and what's really available. With so much demand, there's expected to be a 40% shortage in just the next 17 years. Now, what you decide to eat has every single thing to do with this. Scientists are very concerned about water scarcity. But I think it's really more a matter of water management, isn't it? Yeah, instead of focusing on technologies, I think we should be first looking at choices. Is this a good choice? How about any of these? Are any of these good choices? I mean, do you know that it requires 400 gallons of water just to slaughter one cow or one pig, grass-fed or not, in addition to these other figures for the act itself in slaughterhouses? And we slaughtered 145 million cows and pigs last year, just in the US. Much of our fresh water is not fully renewable in our lifetime, and it's certainly not infinite in quantity. How about some basics? Time for some. Has anyone here ever taken care of or babysat a cow or a pig for a few days? I know at least one person has for more than a few days. Yeah, good. Good. Well, then you'd know, along with everything else, that the researchers are right, that every cow does need 20 to 30 gallons or more of water to drink each day, 15 gallons for a pig and less than half that for a chicken. This is important for everyone to know, because if someone wants to eat these things, they should know what's going on behind the scenes, besides how really wonderful they are as personalities. So just one of the billions of livestock raised each year, just one of them, drinks 70 times the amount of water that one of us would each day of its life. An area of tremendous misuse of water and land combined is in the state of California, where, among other things, they use 900,000 acres of land. 900,000 acres of land to produce alfalfa. That's a staggering amount of land. How many here are from California? Why do you do that? Shame on you. Well, because it requires 1 to 2 million gallons of water per year to irrigate just one of those 900,000 acres. And guess what? They all get irrigated. Every one of them. It's sadly true. So guess where all that alfalfa and water in it is used? It goes to livestock. 5% to horses. The rest to livestock. 75% of it goes to dairy cows. The average household in our country uses 50,000 gallons of water in 1 year, according to the EPA. About the same outdoors. That's quite a bit of water. And it's what we're focused on in times of drought, isn't it? Like how to reduce this. The average person in our country, though, consumes 206 pounds of meat in 1 year, divided between 46 pounds of pig and 58 pounds of cow and 102 pounds of chicken and turkey, in addition to the 248 eggs and 616 pounds of dairy products, which equates to 405,000 gallons, conservatively, of water per person per year just to support that animal product diet. So now, a more realistic view that the EPA should use is that every household of 3 people in the US, well, they use over 1 million gallons of water each year, not 50,000, 1.2 million gallons, and 96% of that outrageous water use is from their choice to eat animals. So whenever there's a drought or water shortage anywhere in our country, which there are, does our government or your community ever step up and declare a state of rationing or eliminating meat or dairy? Why not? Why shouldn't they? Over 90% of the world chooses food that's unhealthy for them and for our planet. And these are some of the reasons why. All are significant, but most overwhelming is the complex and quite powerful combination of psychological, cultural, social, political interactions. And how do we solve this? I think that nearly everything can be solved with education. And we need to reverse the trend of tiptoeing around this subject by the media and by authors and educators and certainly many of the new food movements where we get most of our information from. Speaking of food movements, buying local, as I mentioned earlier, has little to do with sustainability other than from an economic standpoint. Who would have thought that an interesting but somewhat poorly designed study in 2001 showing that just 28 food items had to travel 1,500 miles to get to a grocery store in Iowa, I mean, who would have thought that study would have created such a tremendous cultural shift to eat only local foods and create new words like locavore and food miles? But we need to be concerned about food choices, right? Not food miles. And here's why. We now know that transporting food from producer to your retailer is only responsible for 4%. 4% of all the fossil fuels used and all the greenhouse gases emitted in the food production process. It's much more relevant to view this a completely different way. The cradle-to-grave assessment. Instead of greenhouse gases, which are important, well, what are all the detrimental effects to get these items to our plate? Well, to calculate that, you've got to go back to where these food items begin. You got to go back to the origins. using a life cycle analysis, you'd see very quickly that eating non-local but plant-based foods have minimal sustainability concerns versus eating animal products produced next door that contribute these percentages, not 4%. They contribute these percentages to some of the many aspects of global depletion. An important part of our solution process will be the development of new agricultural systems, community-supported agriculture, farm to table, small and local farms, real food, slow food, organic, biodynamic, traceable, urban agriculture, all only make sense if they don't involve animals. Eventually, the wealth of any nation will be redefined in terms of its natural resources and strength of its sustainable systems. Our survival may depend on how quickly and accurately we begin to define this word sustainable. We're going to see sustainability become a growth opportunity and a risk management strategy for businesses, essentially transforming economics. It's already started. Futurists sit around and ask themselves, what one new idea will change the world drastically in the next century? Well, will it be new nanotechnology, transhumanism and robotics, traceability within businesses, or even renewable energy systems? Well, in terms of ensuring our existence, that one transforming idea that futurists are asking themselves about is for all humans on Earth to eat only plant-based foods. It's just not so new. And then there's our pitiful Farm Bill. Where do I begin here? Okay, so, all right, well, here's our previous 2008 Farm Bill, riddled with serious problems. And keep a good eye on this. That's our 2008 Farm Bill. Here's our new 2012 Farm Bill, which is our 2008 Farm Bill, extended until September this year because it was locked up in political disagreement and indecision, and now, as of yesterday, sequestration. What a tremendous opportunity this was, and still is, for our country to solve a number of serious problems that we have, ranging from our fiscal cliff to our climate change cliff to our healthcare crisis cliff. They're all the same cliff. It's been frankly difficult for me to watch our policymakers over the last year spend so much time and money trying to construct policies based on improper definitions of the phrase healthy food. Many of the major changes that were proposed for this bill, and still are aimed at taking away economic support from factory farms and giving more support to small family farmers, thinking that in itself will produce healthier food. It's not at all. Essentially, it's going to be shifting funds from large meat and dairy operations to small meat and dairy operations. That's never going to work. Another misused term tossed around by Farm Bill lobbyists, and most of us, frankly, is one aspect, not all aspects, but one aspect of agribusiness. Yeah, it seems to be the root of all food evil in our country, doesn't it? But is it really? Is it really? Cal Organics, I mean, they have some issues, but Cal Organics is one of the many large-scale plant-based food production operations. I picked them out. I thought it was a little closer to home here. They happen to be the world's largest producer of organic carrots with over 30,000 acres in operation and over 6,000 employees. To me, that makes them an example of agribusiness in a way, doesn't it? Sure it does. My neighbor back in Michigan, who doesn't like me very much, is a small family farmer that raises and slaughters their own animals. He's not agribusiness, but his operation is the problem, not Cal Organics. I have another solution then, dealing with accountability, which would get us on track much quicker, and it's what I call the eco and health risk tax combined. And it goes something like this. You're familiar with the nutrition fact label. This happens to be ground beef or ground cow, something the average consumer would purchase. Well, we could begin by simply placing a little notation on the bag or on the label. That's where it needs to be. It could say this, but this might get a little complicated. So it could say not so good on it. It could say not a good choice. Or in the future, when all this becomes voice activated, when you're shopping for food, a little Siri voice could pop out and slap your hand and say, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Now, this is all a good start, but it's most important to reflect these factors into costs. factors are only going to go so far. We've got to slap a cost on this. This is not a carbon tax. It is not a soda tax, which would vastly understate the problem, and therefore it wouldn't work. It's an eco and health risk tax, something we've never done before, because the true cost to our environment and to our own health has always been externalized. It's never been directly paid for, with our heads always turned in the opposite direction. We'll eventually need to develop this top-down approach to our decisions about food, as well as a bottom-up or grassroots educational approach. That's because 50 years from now, I hope it doesn't take that long, but 50 years from now, I firmly believe there will be two major but quite disparate groups of individuals regarding food choices. One will be aware, actively conscientious, and eat only, not primarily, only plant-based foods. The other type of individual, though, will be unaware, constrained by culture, or they simply won't care, like my neighbor. Therefore, they're going to continue eating animals. So a top-down approach is going to be necessary to coerce them to eat the right foods. Why top-down again? Why coercion? Well, because at some point in time, it's inevitable, 30 to 50 years from now, that those eating only plant-based foods will no longer tolerate the ecological imposition placed on them by those that eat animals. You wait and see. This is one of the questions of our future. This and aquaculture, which it's a topic that's gaining momentum, which I find is a natural path for people wanting just so badly to hang on to the false sense of needing versus simply wanting to eat animal products. It's the path of least resistance. Well, let's take a look at a couple different ways to answer this question. Well, there you have it. That's certainly one way to answer it. He thinks so, and so do many others. My thought, though, is that we need to be fully aware of the consequences of our food choices, not partially aware, and we need to understand what we're doing to all areas of global depletion. And we need to know the magnitude and the urgency of the problem. You know what? This is not a go meatless on Monday type of problem. So let's take a look at another way to answer this question and how sustainable raising grass-fed livestock really is. To do this, I think it's time to go to the very essence of the whole problem. If we gave everyone in this room 1 acre of land to grow any food you choose, what would you grow? What should you grow? Well, at all my other college and university lectures, the students know what they want to grow. Yeah, I don't know what this is, but it probably should be the male hemp plant. But, but remember, we're trying to talk about food here, and on this 1 acre we give you, you could raise 1 grass-fed cow, just like many would want you to do, thinking it's fully sustainable, just like that New York Times multiple times best-selling author does. But in most areas of the world, 1 acre isn't nearly enough. You're going to need 5, 10, even 20 acres for that 1 cow. This is a region considered one of the most sustainable grass-fed operations found anywhere on Earth in the southern hemisphere that I visited. Here, I still found the ratio to be 2 acres of land needed for every 1 cow. So with that 1 acre we give you, you'd have to borrow some land from your neighbor. You're already off on the wrong foot, or if you're going to raise a cow. Or you could go this route, and you could plant something like this. On just half your acre, you could plant, sure, or you could grow this or any one of a number of other plants, thousands to choose from. Kale's a good choice, though, providing you, obviously, with much-needed micronutrients, fiber, and phytonutrients that you can't get in any part of your cow. When looking at global growing applications, how cool is this? Plants like kale and collard greens actually will continue to grow through extremes of temperatures from -5 to 10 degrees below zero in my backyard here through 105 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And by the way, that, in case you haven't seen this in a while, that white material, that's snow. Just checking. Okay, and after you pick the leaves from kale or collard greens, anybody know what happens after you pick the leaves? Well, they grow back. New ones grow back. They regenerate. I bet your cow can't do that. And on the other half an acre you have left over, you could plant this, quinoa. Yeah, you could plant quinoa or kamut, buckwheat, amaranth, all ancient grain power foods, or legumes. You could plant anything. So there you have it. If you used your 1 acre plus borrowed land from your neighbor for grass-fed livestock, you'd end up with 100 to 400 pounds of a food that's then implicated in numerous disease states. And along the way, you produce 3 to 4 tons of methane and carbon dioxide, and you've used minimally 30,000 gallons of water. In most cases, that's just for them to drink. In most cases, you're going to use 1 million to 2 million gallons of water for that one cow. Or instead, if you use your acre of land to grow something like this kale quinoa combination, you produce 20 to 50,000 pounds of food that's infinitely healthier for you to eat and for our planet to grow. It's literally astounding what you can produce on that 1 acre of land if you use it correctly. With all the vegetables, fruit, grain, you can feed yourselves, and you can feed your friends and your family, and give some to your neighbors, and you'll have a few thousand pounds of great food left over. So you know what you could do? You could box some of it up, and you could send it to all those starving children in the world. It can be done. Now, it's quite an amazing difference, isn't it? Now imagine extrapolating that model out, or variations thereof, in terms of global use of our resources. And now answer that question about how sustainable raising grass-fed livestock really is. That's what I'm asking before he dismissed me from the farm. No, he didn't. And for those who still think that raising or eating any animal is sustainable, then it's time to introduce this concept: relative sustainability. That'll work. How sustainable is it to raise and eat any animal product in a relative sense as compared to plant-based foods? How can we best use our resources? What foods will have the very least effect on our atmosphere or climate change? And of course, which foods best promote our own human health, and which are the most compassionate? This is the way we need to start viewing things in a relative sense from this day forward. So it's time to go back to that very first photo that we saw earlier that you were supposed to tuck away instead of thinking about what the good food is for lunch coming up here. You need to know that this is in Victoria, Australia, where I was researching the ecological effects of their food choices. And instead of seeing beautiful blue skies and green grass and rolling hills, I like taking a closer look at things like this. So here's what I see in the photo. I see this. I see depletion of land, air, food, water, inefficient use of the resources. It's happening here as quickly as anywhere else in the world. But I also see something else, which is the main reason I visited this specific area to research. I mean, lock in this view for just a moment. We're all going to get out of the car, we're just going to walk down the road a few hundred yards, and this is what we see. This 1,000-year-old forest is what that cattle ranch used to be. And it's the home to numerous insects, plants, and animals. There are 3 different types of eucalyptus trees growing here, and one animal in particular that I was looking for, which is now endangered due to destroying its home. It's this little guy. All of his family members were killed. Thousands are each year. He now lives in a small remote rescue area in that forest. And he represents species everywhere on our planet that are being devastated by cattle and other livestock operations on land, fishing in our oceans, lack of awareness about food choice, and politics. In fact, koalas are predicted to become extinct in just 20 years by those few researchers who are close to this situation. It's quite sad. It's quite sad, and that's what I see in that very first photo. Well, when I mentioned that global depletion due to food choice is not a go meatless on Monday type of problem, this is what I mean. I mean, it's not enough. We need to be constantly aware of the fact that if your choice of food involves animals, that means all livestock, grass-fed or not, and fish. It's the driving force behind global depletion, and it's very, very real. And being real, it needs to be dealt with correctly. For instance, you've all heard that we need to vote with our forks, right? Yeah, vote with your forks. Well, don't do that. Don't do that. That's what we've been doing for the past 50 years, and look where it's gotten us. Let's give ourselves more credit than that by becoming more aware about our food choices and be more aware about definitions. And then vote with our forks, vote with our minds first, but then let our forks follow. When you go to the farmer's market, one of the 7,000 we now have in our country, which is good to see, let the local farmers know that you support them. Let them know that you want organically produced food, nothing that comes from raising animals, because that uses too much land and water and it affects our atmosphere and our health. But let them know this, guide them, influence them. Again, you're going to be voting with your minds, not your forks. Now, about the go meatless on Monday campaign. Okay, if you do this, if you go meatless on Mondays, you'll be contributing to climate change, pollution, global depletion of our planet's resources, and your own health on only 6 days of the week instead of 7. You'll be creating a false justification for your actions on those other 6 days of the week. In other words, let's not rest on the laurels of what you're doing right only 1/7 of the time. We've seen tremendous progress. We've seen tremendous progress lately with increased public awareness of all the ill effects of factory farming, haven't we? Yeah, and as a start, this is a good thing, but for every bit of progress this seems to be, there's an equally strong message tagging insidiously along with it, telling everyone that it's still perfectly fine, it's still okay to continue raising, slaughtering, and eating billions of animals. Only now, instead of with factory farms, well, now we can accomplish it by using pastures, small family farms, and our oceans, and we can use the word sustainable and the word less to conveniently hide behind. That's the message we're hearing. What we don't hear, of course, is that we're still hurting the animals, our planet, and ourselves. So, for all the millions and millions of people that are being told that fish and grass-fed livestock are sustainable, healthy, and humane, I think there needs to be a louder and a clearer voice reminding them that it's not. This is one of the many town meetings we hold at our sanctuary, talking about this subject. And baby steps. What are those? I think it's time we do away with baby steps, because we're in fact not babies, are we? I mean, if you think about it, all of us are quite capable of taking big person steps right now. And our planet and all the animals on it shouldn't have to wait with repeated and ongoing assaults until we get this figured out. What does eating less meat really mean? Just in the 1 hour I'm speaking here this morning, from 8 to 9 o'clock, over 8 million animals were slaughtered for us to eat. In that 1 hour, 114,000 tons of grain were fed to livestock we're raising. But during that same hour, 684 children in the world have died from starvation. 6,000 acres of tropical rainforest were destroyed and replaced by cattle. And over 4 million tons of greenhouse gases have been dumped into our atmosphere by livestock. Therefore, I'm advocating a different approach than what Mark Bittman and all the others suggest when they state that we should eat less meat. Well, because with that approach of eating less meat, only 7 million animals will be slaughtered in the next hour, and only 113,000 tons of grain will be wasted, leaving only 683 children in the world that will starve to death in that hour, and only 3 million tons of greenhouse gases will be emitted by livestock. Isn't that what less means? So unlike Jamie Oliver, Mark Bittman, and all other eat less meat advocates in the world, I think these numbers should be 0. Yes, I do, and it's easily attainable. There's no magic involved. Nothing has to be invented. No new technologies have to be employed. It's simply with what we choose to eat. Those are my numbers. And now we're going to take a look at the food service section of the policy of sustainability for the entire University of California system. Why? Well, because it's a perfect example of how the efforts of well-intentioned individuals and institutions can be so very far out of alignment with reality because of the definitions they're using. So you tell me now, is this policy of sustainability sustainable? What about the items I just highlighted in orange? Are those sustainable? How about their primary objective of 20% by the year 2020? I mean, who thought of that? Is that sustainable? Where does this policy fit in terms of relative sustainability? Or are these merely baby steps that happen to affect 500,000 students, faculty, staff, millions of animals on our planet? And one more definition that needs refinement: ethics. The ethical consideration of what we all choose to eat. The topic of conscious eating has always been about animal rights, hasn't it? Hasn't it, Linda? It has. Animal rights. The life and death of other living beings that we consume, how they're treated. Well, these guys are treated pretty well, but Ethics has really always been about this, hasn't it, though? But I think it's time to view conscious eating or ethics in a much different and a much, much larger context. Is it ethical, for instance, for any of us to eat food that causes the extinction of other species if we don't need to? Is it ethical for the vast majority of humans on Earth to cause or contribute heavily to irreversible climate change, loss of our ecosystems, and resource depletion, while 2% of us are living our lives to protect Earth? Is it ethical for any of us to use our planet in a way that exacerbates world hunger and extracts the potential for future generations to survive? Is it even ethical for 310 million Americans to essentially impose their diet-related healthcare costs on the 5 million who choose to eat the right foods? Is it? So you see, I think it's time that we rethink ethics. It needs to be framed much differently than just with animal rights. In fact, one of the chapters in my next book, which is being published right now, one of the chapters in my next book is titled, "Why Should I Pay for What Everybody Else Decides to Eat?" And if we don't change fairly soon, well, we know the animals are going to take matters into their own hands. That's right. Look out. Oh, gosh. Isn't that great? Oh, gosh. Okay. Almost everything we do, every decision we make, every day is based on our culture, what we've learned, what someone else has told us to be acceptable or necessary. After realizing that bloodletting wasn't so healthy for us after all, back in the mid-1800s, we miraculously stopped, even though we had been doing it for more than 3,000 years. There are culturally driven practices we are accepting today, especially with food choices involving all animal products, that are much more unhealthy for our planet. You better believe it. And for us, than bloodletting. And by all counts, we don't have 3,000 years to get it right. Last year, the United Nations pulled together scientists, policymakers, and business leaders from all over the world for the Conference on Sustainable Development, or Rio+20 as it was called, to solve the world's problems of our unsustainable practices. Well, this is great to see because it shows that we're starting to recognize the effect our choices have on our planet. But what was seriously missing from these discussions was food choice, specifically the unsustainable effects of raising and eating animals. It wasn't connected at all. This disconnect was so blatant at Rio+20 that the delegates in attendance were served beef while discussing what to do about sustainability. A number of organizations and governments are quite concerned about how we're going to feed the 9 billion people expected to inhabit Earth by the year 2050. We're hearing about this everywhere because global demand for food, feed, and fiber, as they call it, is going to double from what it is today. So they put together a high-level expert forum to explore solutions. Notice this statement by some of those experts, by the Food and Agricultural Organization regarding food security. You know what? They're absolutely correct. Livestock does hold great importance. Of course, the less we raise, the more secure food will be. According to the United Nations, these key problems need to be resolved in order to feed 9 billion people by 2050. Well, during this last hour, we've all effectively answered these questions for the United Nations, haven't we? And many, many more. Anybody here from the United Nations? Probably not. The first step for them is, of course, to rethink the 3 Fs. Instead of using all of our resources for food, feed, and fiber, we now know that one of these principal needs is, in fact, not needed. The concern for research and technology advancement needs to be replaced by concern for advancement of enlightenment and policy change. As an educated, progressive, and conscientious global community, make no mistake that our journey towards solving how to properly feed the world by the year 2050 begins by placing someone at these high-level expert forums, placing someone there who truly understands that the only way to accomplish feeding 9 billion people in a relatively sustainable fashion is with organically grown plant-based foods, period. Global depletion, then, is caused by our demand to eat animal products. So wasn't this fantastic news when we all heard about it from National Public Radio last summer, that Americans are eating less meat? Well, the results of this NPR poll were snatched up by vegetarian and animal rights groups and broadcast on websites everywhere. They were finally making progress, right? Now, as usual, the whole story wasn't told. Although we ate 1.5 pounds less beef last year per capita, our country still produced, meaning we raised, slaughtered, and packaged 25 billion pounds of beef one year. And even if the U.S. is eating less beef in 2012, consumption and production of all other animal products in our country went up. The U.S. now consumes more turkey per person than any other country in the world, and our yogurt consumption is up 400%. Globally, there's been a 50% increase in consumption of animals and animal products just in the last 15 years. Beef production and raising cattle is predicted to increase 5% annually over the next 8 years. Poultry production is expected to double by the year 2020. The demand to raise, slaughter, and eat animals is hardly believable. In 2012, last year, the one-year figures, these are one-year figures, look like this. So would you call that progress? What does the phrase eating less meat mean here? And if we really try to make a change in someone's diet, I mean, we really try to take away something that they're so used to eating, look what happens. I mean, that is so true. But we're not doomed. We're not doomed at all. We're only here on Earth for what could be considered a fleeting moment of time. And yet we can do this much damage to ourselves and to our planet because of the choices we make. Have those around you ask themselves this simple question on a daily basis. Is the food we're about to eat in the best interest of all living things? There's a great opportunity for all of us to not only be the change that Gandhi so eloquently advocated years ago, but also have a leading role in creating change, creating the food choice change, the evolution that's necessary for survival of our planet. Ears are starting to perk up and listen. Minds and doors are starting to open. So I encourage and challenge everyone to continue becoming more aware about your food choices. Seek more accurate definitions. And then let's all commit to making a difference. But not just with our own health or our own life. No, let's all commit to making a difference in someone else's life. And let's commit to making a difference in the long-term health of our planet. But let's do it now, not later. And let's think about making a difference every day of the week, not just on Mondays. That's what sustainability and positive change to achieve it, I think, is really all about. With that in mind, let's all of us inspire others to become aware. Thank you so very much. You're a tremendous audience, and it's my privilege to be here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. No, thank all of you. Thank you. A tremendous audience. Thank you. Tremendous food. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You made me cry. Amazing presentation. When I become Surgeon General, will you head my Department of Environmental Preservation and Animal Rights? Fantastic. Thank you. All right. 5-minute break, and then we get started again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.